The last time my birth family saw me as a child, I was 13 years old and standing outside a Greyhound terminal in St. Louis with an envelope they told me contained my ticket home. It contained 3 grocery coupons and a blank sheet of paper. My mother had locked the SUV doors before I reached the curb. My father kept both hands on the steering wheel and stared straight ahead. My older sister, Paige, filmed me through the back window, while laughing so hard the camera shook. My mother rolled down her window just far enough to say, "You keep telling us you're smarter than everyone, Audrey. Prove it." Then they drove away. 20 years later, those same 3 people walked into my late aunt's lake house on Thanksgiving, carrying a pecan pie, a folder of bills, and the confidence of people who believed I still needed their permission to call myself family. My mother hugged me for the first time since I was 13 and whispered, "We have all suffered enough. Mara would want this property to come back to us." What she did not know was that my aunt had left me more than the house. She had left the old camera Paige used that day, the recovered video inside it, and a letter explaining exactly why the people sitting down for turkey were never getting the keys. My name is Audrey Collins. I am 33 now, and I manage emergency transportation and student safety for a public school district outside Minneapolis. My job is built around ordinary disasters adults assume someone else will solve: a bus that breaks down in sub-zero weather, a child dropped at the wrong stop, a student whose parent never arrives, a teenager without a phone or cash stranded after an activity bus leaves. I write protocols for the moment. Responsibility becomes blurry, because I learned very young that blurry responsibility is where frightened children disappear. I was born Audrey Avery in Westchester, Ohio, the younger of 2 daughters. My mother, Colleen, ran a polished home staging business. My father, Greg, managed insurance claims and prided himself on being calm. My older sister, Paige, knew how to charm a room. I was the daughter who noticed when the story changed. That became my reputation. Paige was sensitive. I was argumentative. Paige needed encouragement. I needed humility. When Paige backed Mom's SUV into a neighbor's mailbox at 15, Mom somehow turned it into my fault for leaving my bike near the driveway. Dad told me we were solving a family problem, not holding a trial. Paige cried. I apologized. And I learned that truth mattered less than keeping her comfortable. A year later, I won a regional science fair award for mapping unsafe school bus stops. Mom shoved the display into the garage because Paige had friends coming over. Rain ruined it, and when I cried, she told me not to make an accident into a symbol. After that, I stopped bringing my pride home. My Aunt Mara noticed. Mara was Mom's older sister, and the only person in our family who had never learned to be impressed by presentation. She taught 5th grade in Madison, Wisconsin, drove an old Subaru until the doors rusted, and showed up to holidays with homemade bread wrapped in dish towels. She was unmarried, childless, and according to Mom, too comfortable being difficult. I adored her. Mara noticed what the others called normal. One Thanksgiving, while I washed dishes alone as punishment for correcting Paige, she quietly asked whether honesty got me punished often. Mom interrupted before I answered and accused Mara of encouraging me. Mara only said, "You can always call me." I memorized her number that night. The final fight began when Paige copied whole sections of my old bus safety project into a scholarship essay. I refused to let her submit it as her work and asked a teacher for help. Paige missed the deadline while rewriting it, and my parents decided I had sabotaged her future out of jealousy. 2 weeks later, Mom announced a cheerful family road trip to Nashville and St. Louis so we could reset. I wanted to believe the fight was over. We packed lightly because Mom said we were only gone for 3 nights. On the second afternoon, we stopped near downtown St. Louis. Mom said there was a surprise and handed me a white envelope. "Your return information," she said. "Keep it safe, since you think you can manage everything yourself." I thought she was being sarcastic. Paige had a small silver digital camera she carried everywhere. She filmed buildings, signs, her own face, and me whenever I looked annoyed. Dad parked near the bus terminal and said the hotel shuttle was delayed. Mom told me to wait beneath the covered passenger area while they circled the block and sorted it out. "Do not wander," Dad said. For once, follow directions without asking why. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. 30. Heat rose from the pavement. Travelers came and went. I began to think maybe the car had broken down. At 40 minutes, I saw our blue SUV turning toward the curb. Relief hit so fast I ran forward before it fully stopped. The doors remained locked. Paige lifted her camera. Mom rolled down the passenger window. She was smiling. "You keep telling us you are smarter than everybody," she said. "Let's see if you can get yourself home." I laughed because my brain rejected the alternative. "Stop." Paige laughed louder. Dad looked straight ahead. "Mom, open the door. You wanted independence. I am 13. Then maybe you will remember how much families do for you." The SUV started moving. I grabbed the rear handle. Locked. I remember running beside the car for 3 steps and hitting the window with my palm. "Dad!" He never looked at me. Paige's camera stayed pointed at my face. Then the car entered traffic and disappeared. I stood there holding the envelope, like it had become the only object left in the world. Inside were 3 grocery coupons. Mom had clipped that morning, and a folded blank sheet of printer paper. No ticket, no hotel address, no phone. My backpack held $11, a paperback novel, 1 bottle of water, and a granola bar. I knew our home address in Ohio. I did not know how many states away I was in a way useful to a 13-year-old. Panic did not feel like screaming. It felt like arithmetic. How much was a bus ticket? Could $11 get me to Indiana? Would anyone sell a ticket to a child alone? If police called Mom, would she tell them I ran away? Would Dad back her up? I stood beneath a route map pretending to read until the lines blurred. A woman in a red station polo noticed me. Her name was Maribel Santos, and she managed customer service that afternoon. She asked if I had missed a bus. I said the sentence Mom had trained into me. "I am fine. I am not supposed to make trouble." Maribel's face changed. She asked where my adult was. I pointed at the street. She asked what was in the envelope. When I showed her the coupons, she stopped treating the situation like a travel problem and started treating it like a child problem. She brought me inside, gave me cold water, and called transit security. A city police officer named Anthony Reed sat beside me instead of across from me and asked questions slowly. The station cameras showed the SUV slowing at the curb, me running to it, and the vehicle pulling away. The plate was readable. "They called my parents," Mom answered. Officer Reed put the call on speaker because he wanted another employee to document what was said. Colleen did not sound scared. She sounded irritated. She called it a character-building exercise. She said I was dramatic, manipulative, and perfectly capable of waiting for them to return. Officer Reed asked when they planned to return. Mom said, when she understands the lesson. He asked where they were. She refused to say because, in her words, that defeats the purpose. Then Dad got on the line and said nobody was in danger because I was at a staffed terminal. Officer Reed asked whether they had intentionally left a 13-year-old without transportation, identification, a phone, or a responsible adult. Dad said, "You are making it sound worse than it is." That sentence probably changed my life, more than anything Mom said. It told everyone listening that my father understood the facts and still wanted the description softened. A child services worker arrived after dark. Before she asked me anything important, I gave her Mara's phone number from memory. Mara drove 8 hours overnight. I learned later she stopped twice because she was shaking too hard to continue. When she walked into the office shortly after sunrise, she did not say, "How could they?" or, "I knew it." She crouched in front of me and said, "I am here. You do not have to make any decisions in the next 5 minutes." I cried so hard I could not breathe. My parents arrived later that morning with Paige and a family friend who was an attorney. Paige had deleted most of the camera files, or said she had. Mom wore a white blouse and the expression she used when a client complained. Dad kept saying everyone had misunderstood. Paige said the joke had gone too far, but claimed the family always planned to come back. I asked why the envelope was blank. Mom said she must have grabbed the wrong one. I asked why Dad would not unlock the door. He said traffic was moving. I asked why Paige filmed me. Paige said she filmed everything. Every answer arrived with enough truth to sound possible and enough lying to make me feel crazy. Then Mom looked at Mara and said, "This is what Audrey does. She finds adults who will reward her for turning discipline into trauma." Mara became frighteningly calm. "You left a child in another state without a way home." Mom said, "She needed humility." Mara answered, "You needed an audience." I went home with Mara temporarily, and temporary became the rest of my childhood. My parents were given ordinary chances to repair things, acknowledge what happened, apologize without calling it a joke, and rebuild contact slowly. They refused because every path home required admitting they had harmed me. Paige sent one letter saying I had destroyed the family by telling strangers a private story. Mara tore nothing up. She put every letter in a file and told me, "You are allowed to read what people send you. You are also allowed to refuse the job they are trying to give you." Eventually, my parents stopped trying to bring me home. They told relatives I had chosen Mara because she had fewer rules. Mom posted Christmas photographs of herself, Dad, and Paige beneath captions about protecting peace. One year, a cousin sent me a screenshot from Thanksgiving. 3 smiling faces at the table. Mom had written, "Grateful for the family that stayed." I was 15. I threw up after seeing it. Mara sat on the bathroom floor outside the closed door and said, "Their caption does not get to become your biography." I never forgot that. Mara became my guardian, then simply became home. She did not try to buy my loyalty. Life with Mara was almost aggressively ordinary. Grocery lists, library Saturdays, predictable rules, dinner even after arguments, and a bedroom door she knocked on before opening. Ordinary became the safest thing I had ever known. I kept the name Audrey because I liked it. At 18, I took Mara's last name, Collins, because I wanted the person listed as my emergency contact to match the person who actually came. College pulled me back toward the question that had haunted me since Street Lewis. Who becomes responsible when a child is stranded and every adult assumes someone else will handle it? I studied public administration and emergency management, then moved to Minnesota to build school transportation and reunification plans. I created procedures for unclaimed students, snow emergencies, and after-hours activities. Mara visited every summer. My life became useful, quiet, and mine. Paige got married when I was 24. I learned from Facebook. Mom posted a photograph of the 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Paige, and Paige's new husband under the caption, "Our whole family, finally complete." Mara saw it before I did and asked whether I wanted her to hide the post. I said no. I needed to see the sentence once so I could stop waiting for an invitation. 3 years later, Dad sent me a birthday message from a new number. "Hope you are doing well. Your mother is not ready, but time changes things." I did not answer. Time had changed things. It had changed me from the child waiting at a curb into the adult who understood silence can also be a boundary. Mara died when I was 33. A stroke in her kitchen. Fast, unfair, ordinary. She had retired from teaching 3 years earlier and moved to a small lake house near Baraboo, Wisconsin, where she grew tomatoes badly and complained about tourists. Losing her felt nothing like losing my birth family. My parents' rejection had been an injury. Mara's death was grief. Grief hurts because something good existed. That distinction mattered. Her house was left to me, along with a modest investment account, her Subaru, and instructions for her books to go to the elementary school where she had taught. The lake house was worth around $600,000, more because of the land than the building. I planned to keep it. Mara had taught me to swim from that dock. She had sat on the porch during my college breakdowns, job changes, and one terrible breakup. It was the only place on earth where 13-year-old me and 33-year-old me felt like parts of the same person. 12 days after Mara's obituary, Mom sent her first message in years. "Whatever happened between us, Mara's property has always been family property." Paige followed with complaints about assets dividing everyone, and Dad mentioned Paige's daughter's college costs. Nobody began with condolences. They began with the deed. I understood why they had returned. They had not returned because grief softened them. They returned because Mara's death had produced something with a deed. I ignored the first round. Then a package from Mara's attorney arrived. Inside was a letter in Mara's handwriting, a small black memory card in a plastic case, and a note explaining the card had been recovered from Paige's old digital camera. Years earlier, Paige had stored several boxes in Mara's basement while moving. Mara found the camera after a pipe leak forced her to empty the room. The device was dead, but a repair shop recovered old files from the card. One video was dated the day at the St. Louis terminal. Mara wrote, "I spent years knowing what happened because I believed you. I am leaving this because someday they may make you feel that belief was all you had. It was enough for me. But now you have this too." I watched the video once. That was enough. The camera shook from Paige's laughter. I saw myself running toward the SUV, skinny legs, blue backpack bouncing. I heard Mom say, "Let's see if Miss Independent can get home without us." I heard myself scream Dad's name. He glanced at the rearview mirror and said, "Keep driving. She has to learn." Then Paige laughed and said, "She looks like she's going to cry." The recording kept going long enough to catch Mom telling Paige, "Do not lose this. We'll laugh when she gets over herself." I cried not because the video changed my memory, but because it proved memory had been kinder than reality. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. Mom sent another message, asking for one mature conversation. I surprised everyone, including myself, by saying yes. I told them Thanksgiving could happen at Mara's lake house from noon until 4. No overnight guests. No photographs posted online without permission. No discussion about money before the meal. Paige replied with a heart. Mom wrote, "This is what Mara would have wanted." I almost canceled just from reading that sentence. Instead, I invited 3 people of my own. My best friend Lena from Minneapolis, Mara's neighbor Bill and his wife, June, who had helped her through the last years. I did not invite them as witnesses. I invited them because Thanksgiving should contain people who had actually known the woman being used as an excuse. Mom arrived first in a camel coat carrying flowers and a pecan pie from a bakery. Dad followed with 2 bottles of wine. Paige arrived with her husband, Eric, and their 20-year-old daughter, Mallory. I had never met Mallory. She looked more nervous than anyone. Before Mom reached the porch, I saw Paige holding up her phone. 5 minutes later, Lena showed me a public post. 20 years of hurt, but family finds its way home. Thanksgiving healing at Aunt Mara's lake house. She had tagged the location. They had turned reconciliation into content before taking off their coats. I walked outside and said, "Delete it." Paige blinked. "What?" The post. "Audrey, it is positive. You did not ask." Mom stepped between us. "Can we please not begin with control?" I looked at her. "My house, my rule. Delete it or leave." Paige stared at me, probably searching for the 13-year-old who would panic at being called difficult. She deleted it. Happy? More accurate. Lunch was stiff but civil until Mom announced that we had respected my request not to discuss money during the meal. Paige pulled out a navy folder. They wanted Mara's lake house placed in a family trust, her investment account divided, help with my parents' mortgage and retirement, relief for Paige and Eric's debt, and $22,000 a year toward Mallory's college. Mom said keeping everything because Mara felt sorry for me would not honor family. Dad said I had disappeared and spent 20 years punishing them. When Mallory asked what they were talking about, I realized Paige had brought her as emotional leverage without even telling her the plan. I stood and went to the cabinet beneath the television. My hands were calm. I connected Mara's memory card to the small media player I had tested the night before. Mom watched me. "What are you doing?" "Giving us the same memory." Dad's face changed before the screen even lit. Maybe some part of him knew. Paige went pale. The video began. 13-year-old me appeared at the curb. The room filled with Paige's teenage laughter. Mom's younger voice said, "Let's see if Miss Independent can get home without us." My hand grabbed the locked handle. I screamed, "Dad!" On the recording, Greg Avery looked into the rearview mirror and said, "Keep driving. She has to learn." Mallory covered her mouth. Eric stared at Paige. The video continued. She looks like she's going to cry. 16-year-old Paige laughed. Mom turned toward the camera. Do not lose this. We are going to laugh about it when she finally gets over herself. The SUV pulled away. The video ended. Nobody moved. Outside, lake water tapped softly against the dock. Mom spoke first. Mara had no right to keep that. Not sorry, not Audrey. That must have been terrifying. No right to keep that. I had expected anger, but hearing her first instinct after 20 years brought a strange clarity. That is your response? It was private. I was abandoned in public. Dad looked sick. Audrey, I do not remember saying that. You just watched yourself. I do not remember feeling that way. Your feelings were not what locked the door. Paige reached for the remote. Turn it off. It is off. Mallory looked at her mother. You filmed that? Paige started crying. I was 16. Grandma told me it was a joke. You were laughing. I was a kid. You were, I said. And then, at 36, you messaged me about assets, before asking how I felt when Mara died. Paige's face tightened. That is not fair. Fair would have been you apologizing sometime in the last 20 years. Mom said. You have built your entire identity around one afternoon. I stared at her. No, I built my entire career around making sure adults cannot leave children in the gap between someone should help and someone is responsible. You built your story around pretending the afternoon did not matter. Dad finally looked at me directly. His eyes were wet. We came back. Police called you. We came the next morning. With an attorney. He looked away. Mom said, because everything had become dangerous for us. For you. For the family. I was the child. My voice rose for the first time. I was 13 years old with $11 in grocery coupons while you drove away laughing. There was no version of that situation where the endangered party was your reputation. Mallory began crying quietly. I felt terrible for her because none of this belonged on her shoulders. I told her, you did not do anything wrong. Your tuition is not why we are here. Paige said, then help her. Eric looked at his wife. Paige. She ignored him. You have the money now. You have no children. What are you going to do? Hoard it because Mom made one terrible mistake 20 years ago. One terrible mistake. The phrase landed so perfectly that I almost smiled. There it is. Paige looked confused. What? The reason we cannot fix this today. You are still trying to shrink it until my boundary looks bigger than what caused it. Mom began crying. Mara poisoned you against us. June, who had been silent until then, put down her coffee. Mara spent 20 years stopping herself from saying what she thought of you because Audrey asked her not to create more family war. Mom stared at her. June continued. She never needed to poison Audrey. She had to teach Audrey that dinner would still be served after she disagreed with someone. Bill looked at Dad. Mara waited by her phone for years thinking one of you might call and take responsibility. You never did. Dad whispered. I wanted to. I asked. Then why didn't you? He looked at Mom, then Paige, then me. Because every time I tried, Colleen said contacting you would validate your version. And His voice failed. And you chose the ease. That honesty hurt more than another lie. But at least it was real. Mom turned on him. Do not sit there acting like I did this alone. I am not, Dad said. I drove. The room changed. For the first time in my life, my father refused the job of making Mom comfortable. She stared at him like betrayal had just been invented. He looked at me. I am sorry I drove away. I am sorry I did not open the door. I am sorry I let you carry the family's shame because admitting mine would have cost me my marriage. I do not expect you to forgive me, I cried then. Not because the apology fixed anything, because it finally contained a subject and a verb. I did this. Not mistakes were made. Not everyone was hurt. Dad had named his choice. Mom said, this is unbelievable. We came here to heal. I looked at the folder. You came here with a mortgage balance and a transfer request. Money is part of real life. So was I. Paige stood. Are you really keeping all of Mara's money? Yes. That is disgusting. Mara chose what happened to her property. Because you manipulated her for 20 years. I was 13 when she took me in. Exactly. She got to play savior while Mom and Dad suffered. Mallory stood abruptly. Stop. Everyone looked at her. She wiped tears from her face. Mom, you brought me here and told me Aunt Audrey had stolen Grandma Colleen's inheritance. I turned to Paige. Paige's face drained. Mallory continued. You said if I was polite and talked about college, maybe she would realize family matters. Eric closed his eyes. Paige said, I was trying to protect your future. Mallory shook her head. You were using me. That sentence did what the video had not. Paige sat down like her knees had failed. I moved the Navy folder back across the table. Here is my answer. The lake house stays mine. Mara's investment account stays where she left it. I am not paying anyone's mortgage, business debt, or retirement allowance. Mallory, if you ever want advice about scholarships, work study, or financial aid, you can contact me directly without your mother. I will not purchase a relationship with you either. Mallory nodded through tears. Okay, Mom stood. So this whole Thanksgiving was an ambush. You asked to come. Because I thought my daughter had grown up. I felt the old wound reach for me and find no place to hold. I did. Mom grabbed her coat. When you are old and alone in this house, remember what pride cost you. Mara's house was full of people who had chosen me. Lena stood in the kitchen. June and Bill sat at the table. Dad was crying. Mallory was asking for my phone number. I looked around and said, I already learned the difference between alone and abandoned. Mom left. Paige followed after arguing with Eric in the driveway. Eric and Mallory stayed another half hour because Mallory did not want to ride with her mother while she was angry. Dad stayed until sunset. Before leaving, he asked if he could write to me. Not call, not visit, write. I said yes, but only if the letters were about responsibility, not requests for forgiveness or updates about Mom. He nodded. That is more than I deserve. Probably. He smiled sadly. You still remember exact words. It is useful in my job. Thanksgiving ended with leftover turkey, dirty dishes, and no cinematic sense of victory. I was exhausted. Lena found me on the porch after everyone left. Do you regret it? She asked. I thought about 13-year-old me holding blank paper, Mara driving through the night, Mom's first reaction to the video, Dad finally saying I drove. No, I said, but I wish truth did not have to hurt this much to become simple. After Thanksgiving, Mom told relatives I had staged the video to humiliate her, and Paige posted vague quotes about people who weaponize childhood trauma for money. I ignored both. Mallory began emailing me directly about scholarships and campus jobs. I helped with information, never a check, and she never asked for one. Dad started writing monthly. His first letter was mostly excuses, so I returned it with one note. Try again without explaining Mom. His second admitted that he had enjoyed being the reasonable parent because quiet cruelty let him feel better than Mom while I still got hurt. I kept that letter. Months later, I agreed to one video call. We are not close, and I do not know if we ever will be. Forgiveness is not a restoration button. Sometimes it simply means I can think of him without my body returning to the curb. Mom has never apologized directly. She mailed a Christmas card that said, "The door is open when you are ready to stop living in the past." I returned it unopened. It was the first return to sender envelope of my life that felt peaceful. Paige and I remain no contact except for anything involving Mallory. I do not hate her. Hate requires a kind of daily attention I no longer want to spend. Mara's lake house remains mine. I repaired the dock, kept her terrible tomato beds, and created a small emergency ride fund in her name for students stranded without a verified guardian. The first time it was used, a 16-year-old girl with 3% phone battery and $6 was kept with a staff member until a safe ride arrived. Nobody called her dramatic. She simply got home. I went into the staff restroom afterward and cried. Healing does not always look like forgiving the people who hurt you. Sometimes it looks like building a system where the next child does not have to be as lucky as you were. I kept Mara's letter and the memory card in a safe. Not because I need proof every morning. I do not. The video no longer decides whether I believe myself. For years, my birth family's greatest power was not what they did. It was how successfully they taught me to question whether it counted. They called abandonment a lesson, exclusion a consequence, silence, peace, and my reaction drama. Once I stopped accepting their vocabulary, the entire structure became obvious. A child does not owe gratitude to adults for eventually coming back after deliberately leaving her. A daughter does not owe access because parents grow old. A niece does not owe inherited property to relatives who ignored the aunt when she was alive and remembered family only after a deed appeared. And a boundary is not revenge simply because the person on the other side dislikes it. I am still Audrey. I still memorize exits when I enter unfamiliar buildings. I still keep more battery on my phone than any reasonable person needs. I still check transportation plans twice. But those habits no longer make me the frightened girl at the terminal. They are just pieces of a woman who built a useful life out of something that once felt uselessly cruel. My mother drove away because she wanted to teach me I could not survive without the family. Mara taught me a better lesson by driving through the night. The people who love you do not test whether you can survive their absence. They make sure you know where home is. So, tell me honestly, if your parents deliberately abandoned you at 13, spent 20 years telling everyone you chose to leave, and then came back only after the aunt who raised you left you a valuable lake house, would one sincere apology ever be enough to reopen that door? Or would protecting the life you built mean keeping some relatives outside forever?